There is an angel. Even angels fear, not because he rebels, not because he wages war, but because, when he appears, something ends. He does not announce himself. He does not argue. He does not delay. Stories stop. Time collapses. And the soul knows this is the final moment. They call him Azrael. Before you go any further, understand this. This is not a story meant to be rushed. Listen carefully. Each word matters. Each moment builds towards something inevitable. Stay with this journey until the end, because by the time it's over, the angel of death may no longer look the way you expect. Let us begin. Welcome to my channel, the Mythic Library. Today, we are talk about Angel of Death. He called Azrael. Let's begin. Before clocks learned to count, before shadows learned to stretch, before the idea of an ending had ever crossed the fabric of existence, there was no death. This is difficult for the human mind to grasp, because everything human experience is shaped by limits. Days end, bodies weaken, breath runs out. But in the earliest design of creation, there was no such boundary. Existence unfolded without decay, without departure, without the quiet fear that someday everything would stop. There was only being. The heavens existed in perfect order. Angels moved according to purpose, not desire. They did not question time, because time did not press against them. They did not fear loss, because nothing could be taken away. Creation was incomplete, but it was harmonious, like a melody waiting for its final note. And then came intention. When the first human was conceived in divine will, something unprecedented was introduced into existence. A being made not only of light or fire, but of earth. Something fragile, something temporary, something capable of change. Adam was formed from dust, shaped carefully, deliberately. He was placed into a garden that knew no suffering. Eden was not merely a location. It was a condition. No hunger, no sickness, no aging, no death. Life flowed endlessly forward, uninterrupted. But perfection, as it turns out, is not the same as completion. Choice entered the world alongside humanity, and with choice came the possibility of disobedience. When Adam and Eve reached for what had been forbidden, they did more than break a rule. They altered the structure of reality itself. Sin did not simply stain humanity. It created an ending. For the first time, existence required a conclusion. Death was not an accident. It was a consequence, one that had never existed before. And once death entered the world, it could not be ignored, delayed, or undone. Life would now move towards something. Every breath would lean forward. Every heartbeat would count. But death could not simply happen on its own. Something so final required order, authority, responsibility. Someone had to carry it. Among the angels, each role was clear. Some were messengers, moving between heaven and creation, carrying words too powerful for silence. Some were warriors, formed for conflict beyond human comprehension. Others sustained balance, motion, and harmony in ways no mortal mind could fully understand. But death was different. Death was not a message. Death was not a battle. Death was not correction or punishment. Death was conclusion, and no angel desired that role. It is said that when God commanded the angels to gather the dust from earth, the dust that would become the body of the first human, there was hesitation, not rebellion, not refusal, something deeper, reluctance. Michael approached the earth, and the earth cried out. It begged not to be diminished, not to lose what had been entrusted to it. Michael, the great warrior, whose strength was unquestioned, withdrew. Gabriel came next, the messenger, whose voice carried revelation itself. But Gabriel felt compassion for the earth's plea. He turned away, unable to take what was asked. One by one, the angels returned without the dust, not because they were weak, but because they understood. To take the dust was to participate in something irreversible. It meant creating a being who would one day die. And no angel wanted to be tied to that fate. Then, Azrael was sent. At that moment, Azrael was not feared. He was not revered. He was not singled out. He was simply an angel, faithful, silent, obedient. He did not argue the command. He did not weigh the consequences. He did not pause to consider what this task might lead to. He went to the earth. The earth wept, and Azrael did not turn away. Some traditions say he spoke gently, promising that what was taken would one day return. Others say he said nothing at all. What matters is not what he said, but what he did. He gathered the dust. He completed the task. And when he returned to God, with the dust in his hands, something in the heavens shifted. In that moment, Azrael demonstrated a quality no other angel had revealed: the ability to carry unbearable responsibility without hesitation. He did not lack compassion. He mastered it. He did not resist emotion. He did not allow it to override command. And that made him different. The dust became flesh. Flesh received a soul. Humanity began its journey, and death, now woven into existence, waited patiently for its appointed times. Azrael was given a new role, not as punishment, not as reward, but as necessity. He would become the boundary. He would stand at the crossing between what lives and what no longer does. He would not choose when life ends. He would not judge worth or innocence. He would act only when commanded. Azrael would become the keeper of endings. This is why fear followed his name, not because he was cruel, not because he delighted in suffering, but because he represented certainty. Where other angels inspired hope, courage, or awe, Azrael inspired stillness. When he appeared, questions ceased, resistance collapsed, stories concluded. Even angels understood this. Michael led battles, but battles end. Gabriel delivered messages, but messages fade. Prophecy pointed forward, but forward eventually stops. Azrael did not point forward. He pointed beyond. Death needed structure, and Azrael became that structure. Over time, he would be known by many names, across many traditions, but his essence remained unchanged. He was not death itself, but death could not move without him. Every life that began would one day pass through his care. Every soul, no matter how powerful, how beloved, how insignificant it seemed, would meet him. This was not a role of darkness. It was a role of balance. Without death, existence would stagnate. Without endings, beginnings would lose meaning. Azrael ensured that the cycle continued exactly as it was designed, not early, not late, not unfairly. And yet, despite this sacred purpose, something about Azrael unsettled even the heavens. Because while other angels acted within moments, wars, messages, and miracles, Azrael's work stretched across all time. His presence was not bound to one era, one place, or one people. He was always waiting, not watching impatiently, not lurking maliciously, simply waiting. And that is why his silence carried more weight than thunder. This was the beginning of Azrael's story, not as a monster, not as a villain, but as the angel who accepted the burden no one else would. And once accepted, it could never be returned. The end had found its guardian. Once death entered creation, it did not arrive all at once. It crept forward slowly, almost cautiously, as if the universe itself was learning how to end things. The first human generations lived long lives. Time stretched in unfamiliar ways. Years passed like seasons rather than sentences. Humanity was still close to its beginning, still warm with the memory of Eden, still learning what it meant to exist inside a body that could weaken. And through all of it, Azrael watched. He did not interfere. He did not rush. He did not hover. He waited for the first appointed moment. The arrival of death was not announced with thunder or fire. There was no great cosmic sign to mark the moment when the first soul was to be separated from its body. Instead, it arrived quietly, almost gently into a world that had never known loss. When the first human death approached, creation itself hesitated. According to ancient traditions, the earth trembled. The heavens fell silent. Angels who had never witnessed an ending gathered not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. This had never happened before. A soul had never been removed from flesh. No one had ever crossed beyond life. And Azrael stepped forward. This was the moment that defined him, not the gathering of dust, not the title he would later bear, but the first time he carried out the role that only he could fulfill. The soul resisted, not out of rebellion, but confusion. It had never known separation. The body had never failed it before. The idea of leaving felt unnatural, like being torn from a home that still stood. Azrael did not force the soul. He did not frighten it. He did not deceive it. He revealed truth. He showed the soul what it was and what it was not. He made it understand that it had never belonged to the body, only inhabited it. That the body was a vessel, not a prison. That leaving was not annihilation, but transition. And when the soul finally separated, death became real, not as an idea, not as a consequence, but as an experience. From that moment on, the universe was changed forever. The first ending created a ripple that spread across creation. Angels understood something new. Humanity felt something unfamiliar. Time itself seemed to tighten, as though it now carried weight. Life was no longer endless. Moments mattered, choices mattered, and Azrael became essential. But with necessity came isolation. Unlike other angels, Azrael's path did not intersect with celebration or victory. He was not present at births or miracles. He did not descend with revelation or triumph. His presence marked conclusions, and conclusions are rarely welcomed. Humans did not curse him at first. They feared what they did not understand. Over time, fear hardened into stories. Stories turned into symbols. Symbols became shadows. Azrael did not correct them. He did not defend himself. He did not explain. His role was not to be understood. It was to be fulfilled. As generations passed, death became more frequent. Bodies aged. Accidents happened. Illness appeared. The world grew heavier with each passing century, burdened by the knowledge that nothing stayed forever. And every time a life reached its final breath, Azrael was there, not always visibly, not always directly, but always precisely. He did not come early. He did not arrive late. He did not miss a single soul. This precision set him apart even further from other angels. Warriors could fail. Messengers could be misunderstood. Protectors could be resisted. Azrael could not be delayed. And this is where his reputation truly began to change. Humans noticed patterns. Some deaths were peaceful. Others were terrifying. Some souls seemed to drift away quietly, while others struggled violently as though resisting something inevitable. From these differences, meaning was born. People began to believe that how one lived shaped how one died, that death was not random, but reflective, that the final moment carried truth, and they were not wrong. Azrael did not create fear or peace, he revealed it. The soul arrived at its final moment carrying the weight of its life. Regrets clung to it. Love anchored it. Guilt weighed it down. Faith steadied it. And Azrael met the soul exactly where it stood. To those at peace, he appeared gentle. To those filled with fear, he appeared overwhelming. To those who denied the end, he appeared unstoppable. This was not punishment. It was honesty. And honesty can be terrifying. As death spread across humanity, angels began to understand the magnitude of Azrael's role. They saw the accumulation of endings. They sensed the growing silence that followed him. They felt the gravity of a being who moved through all eras, untouched by time. Some angels began to step aside when he passed, not because he commanded them, but because instinct told them to. Azrael did not dominate the heavens. He did not seek authority, but his function placed him beyond comparison. Every angel had a task, but only one angel concluded tasks. This distinction created distance. Azrael became solitary, not by choice, but by necessity. No other angel could share his burden. No one else could stand beside him at every ending. To do so would be to experience infinite loss. So he walked alone. And yet, despite the solitude, Azrael did not grow bitter. He did not resent humanity for fearing him. He did not resent angels for avoiding him. He did not resent existence for placing this burden upon him. He accepted. Acceptance became his defining trait. As civilizations rose and fell, as languages formed and disappeared, Azrael remained unchanged. Empires believed they could escape death through power. Kings believed their names would protect them. Warriors believed glory could shield them. Azrael proved them all equal. No crown delayed him. No army resisted him. No prayer altered his timing. This impartiality deepened both fear and respect. Death did not discriminate. And Azrael, as its steward, reflected that absolute fairness. Still, myths grew darker. Stories painted him as monstrous. Artists imagined him cloaked in shadow. Poets gave him hollow eyes and cold hands. Parents whispered his name to frighten children into obedience. Azrael did nothing to correct the image, because truth did not require defense. And yet, beneath the fear, another understanding slowly formed. Without Azrael, the world would drown in its own continuity. Lives would stack endlessly. Meaning would dissolve. Urgency would disappear. Love would lose its intensity. Sacrifice would become meaningless. Death gave life shape. Azrael gave death order. This was the paradox at the heart of his existence. The angel most feared by humanity was also the reason humanity mattered. Because when time is limited, moments become precious. Azrael knew this, even if humanity did not. Each soul he guided carried a story. Some were small, some reshaped history, some were unfinished, some burned brightly and briefly. Azrael treated them all the same, not with indifference, but with precision. He did not mourn, he did not celebrate. He ensured passage, and with every soul he guided, the universe learned a little more about what it meant to end. By the time humanity fully understood death, Azrael had already guided countless souls beyond the veil. He had become practiced, exact, unwavering. But something else had begun to change. Humans started looking beyond death. They wondered where souls went. They imagined judgment, reward, reunion, punishment, peace. Religions formed around these questions. Rituals emerged. Prayers rose not to stop Azrael, but to prepare for him. This marked a turning point. Death was no longer just feared, it was anticipated. And anticipation transformed Azrael's role yet again. He was no longer merely the angel who ended life. He became the angel who marked transition, the guide, the threshold, the final witness. This evolution did not lessen his burden, it deepened it. Because now, every soul he guided carried expectation, hope, terror, faith. Azrael carried them all, and still, he did not falter. This is why, even among angels, his presence carried weight. He embodied something older than fear and deeper than power. He embodied inevitability, and inevitability does not shout. It does not threaten. It does not rush. It simply arrives. By the end of the early ages of humanity, Azrael was no longer just fulfilling a role. He was the role. The universe had adjusted around him. Life moved forward, knowing it would one day meet him. History unfolded under the silent awareness of his certainty. And in that certainty, Azrael stood unchanging, waiting for every final breath yet to come. The first ending had taught creation how to let go, and Azrael would teach it again and again and again. Give chapter 3, expanded up to 1600 to 2000. Chapter 3, the angel who watches all lives. By the time humanity had filled the valleys and climbed the mountains, by the time cities rose and names were carved into stone, Azrael had become something no other angel had ever been. He had become everywhere, not in presence, but in responsibility, while other angels were sent to specific places, specific people, or specific moments. Azrael's task knew no boundaries. His duty extended to every corner of the world, to every culture, every language, every life that drew breath. No one was outside his reach, not kings, not prophets, not children, not the forgotten. This universality reshaped how the heavens understood him. Angels, who once saw him as simply another servant of divine command, now recognized something deeper. Azrael was no longer defined by where he went, but by what he knew. His awareness had to stretch across all living beings simultaneously, for death does not wait in line. It arrives in many places at once, and Azrael never failed. Ancient traditions describe this awareness through symbols: a divine scroll, a cosmic register, a record beyond human comprehension. Upon it were written the names of every living soul. When a life began, a name appeared. When that life ended, the name vanished. This scroll was not a tool of judgment. It was a map of responsibility. Azrael did not consult it to decide. He consulted it to obey. He did not choose timing. He responded to it. And yet, this symbol points to something profound. Azrael knew everyone, not personally, not emotionally, but completely. Every breath, every heartbeat, every final moment was within his awareness. He did not watch lives unfold in detail. He did not need to. What mattered was the moment when existence crossed the threshold from life to beyond. To carry such awareness without collapsing beneath it required a nature unlike any other. This is where descriptions of Azrael's form begin to shift from poetic to unsettling. Human language struggled to describe a being capable of such omnipresent responsibility. So traditions turned to scale. They spoke of vastness, of multiplication, of forms that defied logic. Azrael was said to have 4 faces, each one oriented toward a direction of the world: north, south, east, and west. This was not meant to suggest physical travel, but constant attention. There was no blind spot, no unseen corner of creation, but even that was not enough. So, the stories continued. Azrael was said to possess thousands of wings, not wings meant for flight, but wings representing function. Some were wings of mercy, soft and gentle, used to escort souls who left the world peacefully. Others were wings of severity, harsh and unyielding, reserved for those whose lives ended in resistance and fear. These wings were not weapons. They were expressions of consequence. Still, the most disturbing image was yet to come. Azrael's body, according to some traditions, was covered in eyes and tongues, one for every living soul on earth. Each eye represented awareness. Each tongue represented connection. His form shifted constantly, growing and shrinking as populations rose and fell. When a life ended, an eye closed, a tongue vanished. His very being reflected the state of existence itself. This image was not meant to frighten. It was meant to explain. How could one being manage the endings of billions? How could one presence reach across continents and centuries without delay? Because Azrael was not moving through the world existed within his responsibility. And yet, despite this overwhelming scope, Azrael remained precise. He did not confuse lives. He did not miss moments. He did not mistake one soul for another. Every ending was exact. This precision is what truly separated him from all other angels. Power can be impressive. Strength can inspire awe. But precision, on a universal scale, is something else entirely. It suggests not force, but control. Not dominance, but harmony. Azrael was not overpowering life. He was completing it. As human awareness of death deepened, so did the stories surrounding Azrael's appearances. People claimed to see him at bedsides, in battlefields, in moments of sudden disaster. Others claimed he came in dreams, standing silently, watching. These encounters varied dramatically. Some described him as terrifying, a towering presence that drained warmth from the air. Others described him as calm, almost familiar. Some said he spoke, Others insisted he never did. All of them were right. Azrael did not have one form. His appearance adapted to the soul he approached. The righteous saw peace, because peace is what they carried. The fearful saw terror, because terror lived within them. He did not disguise himself, he reflected truth. This adaptability made him deeply personal, without being emotional. Unlike angels who appeared as messengers with fixed appearances, Azrael's form was shaped by the soul's inner state. He was not there to persuade or warn. He was there to conclude. This made him the most honest of angels. Honesty is rarely gentle. As centuries passed, Azrael's role expanded further. He no longer worked alone. The scale of human existence demanded delegation. Lesser angels, sometimes referred to as angels of death, began carrying out portions of his work under his command. This did not lessen his responsibility. It multiplied it. He became not just a servant, but a leader, an overseer of endings, a coordinator of transitions. When wars erupted and death spread rapidly, these angels moved swiftly under his direction. Yet even then, Azrael remained aware of every soul. This system revealed something important. Azrael was trusted beyond measure. Command over death required not just obedience, but absolute alignment with divine will. There could be no ambition, no ego, no deviation. Azrael possessed none. That absence of self is what made him capable of such immense duty. Angels who interacted with him described a profound stillness in his presence. Not silence, but a pause like the space between breaths. Time seemed to hesitate. Motion felt suspended. Even the heavens adjusted around him. This is why stories say that angels lowered their gaze when Azrael passed. Not because he demanded respect, but because instinct recognized finality. He did not bring news. He did not bring change. He brought completion. As human civilizations matured, Azrael's name spread across cultures, adapting to languages and beliefs. Some named him. Some avoided naming him. Some disguised him as symbols. Some turned him into stories meant to comfort or terrify. Through it all, Azrael remained unchanged. Names did not define him. Images did not confine him. Fear did not shape him. He was function, not identity. And yet, in carrying the endings of every life, Azrael began to embody something else entirely, meaning. Because when life ends, its value becomes clear. Choices solidify. Regrets crystallize. Love reveals its depth. And Azrael witnessed all of it, not as a judge, not as a witness in court, but as the final presence, before, beyond. Every soul met truth in that moment, and Azrael stood there not interfering, not consoling, not condemning, simply ensuring passage. This role made him unavoidable, not as a threat, but as a certainty, and certainty is the most powerful force of all. No two deaths are the same. This truth, whispered across generations, became one of the most unsettling realizations humanity ever faced. Lives differed, choices diverged, paths twisted in countless directions, and so did endings. Over time, people began to notice something strange. Death did not always feel identical. Sometimes it came gently, like sleep. Other times it arrived with terror, confusion, or unbearable resistance. And standing at the center of every ending was Azrael. Unlike other angels, Azrael did not possess a single, fixed appearance. He was not bound to one shape, one voice, or one presence. His form was not chosen by him, but drawn from the soul he approached. This was not illusion or deception. It was reflection. Azrael appeared as the soul truly was. For those whose lives had been rooted in faith, humility, and acceptance, Azrael was described as peaceful, sometimes even beautiful. His presence did not darken the room. It softened it. The air felt lighter. Fear loosened its grip. In these moments, death did not feel like loss, but like release. Stories speak of souls greeted with warmth, their final moments marked by clarity rather than confusion. Azrael did not rush them. He allowed understanding to unfold. He gave space for recognition, for surrender, for the quiet acceptance that the journey was continuing, not ending. To these souls, Azrael was not an executioner. He was a guide. But not all lives reached their final moment with such peace. For those burdened by cruelty, denial, or unresolved fear, Azrael appeared differently. His presence was overwhelming. The air felt heavy. Time slowed painfully. The body resisted what the soul already knew was inevitable. These souls did not see Azrael as gentle. They saw him as terrifying, not because he chose to be, but because terror already lived within them. Azrael did not invent fear. He exposed it. This duality became one of the most defining aspects of his nature. He did not deliver the same experience to every soul. He delivered the truth of each soul back to itself. This is why traditions describe him as both merciful and frightening. Why some cultures prayed for a peaceful meeting with him, while others whispered his name with dread. The contradiction was not in Azrael. It was in humanity. Sufi mystics understood this deeply. They taught that death was not a punishment imposed from outside, but a mirror held up at the end of life. Azrael, in this view, was the mirror bearer. His form reflected the soul's inner state, its harmony or its conflict. If the soul was at peace, Azrael appeared as peace. If the soul resisted, Azrael appeared as force. There was no cruelty in this. There was no favoritism, only honesty. This belief changed how many people lived. Death was no longer something to be feared blindly. It was something to prepare for, to shape one's life, so that the final meeting would not be one of terror, but of calm recognition. And yet, despite this spiritual understanding, fear never fully disappeared, because even when death is peaceful, it is still an ending. Azrael did not speak much during these moments. Silence was part of his presence. Words were unnecessary. Souls did not need explanation, they needed certainty. And Azrael embodied certainty completely. Some traditions claim he spoke only when necessary, not to persuade, not to comfort excessively, only to make the soul aware that the moment had arrived. That resistance would not change what was already written. Others say he never spoke at all, that his presence alone communicated everything that needed to be known. Either way, the message was the same. This moment is final, and it is rightful. As humanity spread and cultures diversified, stories of Azrael's appearances grew more detailed. People described him visiting the dying days or even weeks before the final breath. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in visions, sometimes as a stranger who lingered just a little too long. These encounters were rarely dramatic. They were quiet, subtle, almost easy to dismiss. Almost. Those who experienced them often felt a shift afterward, a deep unease, or an unexpected calm. Some took it as a warning, others as reassurance. In either case, the encounter was meant to prepare, not to frighten. Azrael did not ambush the soul. He approached it. But even preparation did not always ease fear. There were souls who clung desperately to the body, who refused to let go, who fought the separation with everything they had. In these moments, Azrael's role became more severe, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Separation had to happen, and separation, when resisted, is painful. This is where the darker descriptions of Azrael emerged. The wings of iron, the hooks, the tearing force. These were not literal weapons wielded in cruelty. They were symbolic attempts to explain the agony of resistance. When a soul refuses to release what it no longer belongs to, the release feels violent. Azrael was not causing pain. He was ending attachment. This distinction mattered greatly in mystical traditions, but it was often lost in popular imagination. Over time, Azrael became simplified into a figure of fear. The nuance faded. The mirror was mistaken for the cause. Still, Azrael continued unchanged. He did not adjust his role to accommodate misunderstanding. He did not soften truth to appear kind. His responsibility was not to be liked, it was to be exact. And yet, there were moments when even fear transformed. Stories tell of hardened souls who, at the final moment, released their resistance. In those moments, Azrael's terrifying presence softened instantly. The force dissolved. Peace returned. Acceptance reshaped the encounter. This suggests something profound. The final moment is not fixed until it happens. Even at the threshold, the soul has a choice not to escape death, but to meet it honestly, to release fear, to let go. Azrael allowed this. He did not rush. He did not deny that possibility, but he did not wait forever, because endings must occur. Through all of this, Azrael remained untouched by emotion. This did not mean he was cold. It meant he was steady. Emotion would have shattered him long ago. To feel the fear of every soul would be unbearable. To absorb the peace of every righteous death would unbalance creation. So Azrael remained centered, still, unmoved, unyielding, not because he lacked compassion, but because compassion, on this scale, had to be expressed as order. This chapter of Azrael's story reveals a difficult truth. Death is not inherently kind or cruel. It is reflective, and Azrael, as its steward, reflects humanity back to itself one final time. He does not judge. He does not condemn. He does not forgive. He reveals. And revelation, at the end of life, is the most powerful experience a soul can endure. By understanding this, fear of Azrael becomes something else entirely. Not terror, but awareness. Awareness that the final meeting will not be shaped by chance, but by the life that came before it. Azrael does not decide what you see, you do. And when the final moment arrives, he will simply ensure that the truth, whatever it may be, is impossible to escape. In the heavens, sound is not constant. This surprises many who imagine celestial realms filled endlessly with song, praise, and motion. In truth, silence exists there too, but it is rare, and it is meaningful. Silence in the heavens is not emptiness. It is anticipation. It is awareness, sharpened to its edge. And there is one presence that brings that silence without effort. Azrael. Unlike other angels, Azrael did not announce his movement. He did not arrive surrounded by light or resonance. When he passed through the realms unseen by humanity, there was no spectacle, only a subtle stillness, as though the universe itself paused to acknowledge him. Angels noticed, not because they feared punishment, not because they were commanded to, but because instinct recognized finality. Michael led hosts of angels into cosmic battles. When he appeared, the heavens stirred with purpose. Gabriel carried revelation, and his arrival was marked by clarity and urgency. Israfil stood ready to sound the trumpet that would end all time, his role heavy with expectation. But Azrael was different. He was not tied to an event waiting to happen. He was tied to events that always happened. Every mission eventually ended at him. This truth shaped how angels regarded him, not as superior in rank, but as singular in function. Azrael represented something none of them could alter or intervene in. When he arrived, debate ceased. Even command structures softened around his presence. It was not fear that silenced the heavens. It was understanding. There are ancient narrations that speak of angels lowering their gaze when Azrael passed. This was not submission, it was recognition. To meet his gaze was to confront the truth that even angels, in their own way, were not eternal in the same sense they imagined. Their roles could conclude. Their tasks could end. Azrael reminded them of this not by word, but by existence. Because while angels do not die as humans do, their missions do, their eras do, their purposes reach completion. And Azrael stood at the edge of every completion, waiting patiently. This made him unsettling, not threatening but absolute. Angels are beings of obedience, but they are also beings of awareness. They understood that Azrael did not operate within the flow of heavenly activity. He existed perpendicular to it, touching everything, yet untouched by urgency or delay. He did not hurry. He did not linger. He arrived when the moment was complete. This stillness shaped Azrael's character more than any title. Silence became his language. Not silence as absence, but silence as certainty. Humans often imagine death as violent, loud, or chaotic, but in truth, death is quiet. Even when it arrives through pain or disaster, the moment of separation, the exact instant when the soul departs, is marked by stillness. Azrael embodied that stillness, and because of this, angels did not speak when he was near. They did not need to. There are stories old, fragmented, passed down through whispers, rather than scripture, that describe moments when Azrael crossed paths with other great angels. These stories never involve conflict. There are no arguments, no rivalries, no displays of power, only pause. Michael, it is said, once halted mid-command when Azrael appeared nearby, not because he was ordered to stop, but because something deeper signaled that action was no longer relevant in that space. Gabriel, the bearer of words, is described as falling silent in Azrael's presence. Messages belong to beginnings. Azrael belonged to endings. Words lost their purpose there. Even Israfil, the angel whose trumpet would one day shake all existence, is said to have waited not in readiness, but in respect. His sound would mark the end of time. Azrael marked the end of lives. One was future, the other was constant. And constancy carries a gravity no single event can rival. This is why some traditions suggest that Azrael could, if commanded, take the soul of any being angel or human alike. Not because he desired such power, but because his function was not limited by form or status. Endings do not discriminate. This idea unsettled even the heavens. Because if Azrael's role extended to angels, then no being was entirely outside the cycle of completion. Everything created had a boundary. Everything designed had an endpoint. Azrael was the boundary. Yet despite this overwhelming authority, Azrael never sought dominance. He did not command angels unless required. He did not impose his presence where it was unnecessary. He remained precise, to the point of invisibility. Authority, in his case, came not from command, but from inevitability. Angels did not obey him because they were told to. They yielded because there was nothing to oppose. This kind of authority cannot be challenged. It cannot be negotiated with. It cannot be resisted without futility. And so Azrael walked alone, not because he was isolated, but because no one could walk beside him without sharing his burden. And that burden was immense. To stand at the edge of every life meant witnessing the end of every story. Not just heroic deaths or infamous ones, but ordinary lives. Quiet lives. Lives that left no mark on history, but meant everything to someone. Azrael witnessed all of them. He did not collect memories. He did not preserve emotion, but he knew. And knowledge, on this scale, is heavy. This is why Azrael is often described as older than time, not because he predates creation, but because time behaves differently around him. Time rushes toward death. Death does not rush toward time. Azrael existed at the convergence point where all timelines eventually meet. This made him appear detached, but detachment was survival. If Azrael felt sorrow for every life, he would fracture. If he felt joy for every peaceful passing, he would lose balance. If he felt guilt for every painful ending, he would collapse beneath it. So he remained centered, balanced, silent. This silence was not emptiness, it was discipline. And that discipline is what made him reliable. God entrusted Azrael with the most sensitive boundary in existence. Not because he was the strongest, not because he was the most feared, but because he was the most stable. He did not waver, even when humanity cursed him, even when angels avoided him, even when cultures twisted his image into something monstrous. Azrael remained unchanged. This constancy is what truly separated him from every other being in creation. Change defines life. Purpose defines angels. But Azrael was defined by completion, and completion does not evolve. It waits. This is why his silence carried such weight. Silence, when chosen, is power. Silence, when sustained, is mastery. Azrael mastered silence because silence was the only language vast enough for his role. When he arrived, conversations ended. Not because he stopped them, but because they no longer mattered. When he stood present, plans dissolved. Not because he interfered, but because plans belonged to futures, and futures had run out. This is why even the heavens respected his stillness. They understood that when Azrael stood near, something sacred was concluding, and sacred endings demand silence. Chapter 5 does not end with action or revelation. It ends the way Azrael does, with quiet certainty, because some presences do not need to speak to be heard, and some silences are louder than thunder. Death does not always arrive unannounced. While many believe Azrael appears only at the final breath, ancient traditions tell a quieter, more unsettling truth. Sometimes he comes before the end, not to take the soul, but to prepare it. These appearances are subtle. They are not dramatic visitations bathed in light or terror. They slip into the edges of consciousness, into dreams, moments of stillness, flashes of recognition that something is changing. Azrael does not shout warnings. He does not demand repentance. He does not force awareness. He allows recognition. Throughout history, people from every culture have spoken of dreams that felt different from ordinary dreams. Dreams that lingered long after waking. Dreams where time behaved strangely. Dreams where a figure stood silently, watching, not threatening, not comforting, simply present. Many would later realize what those dreams meant only in hindsight. In some traditions, Azrael appears as a stranger, an old man, a traveler, a passerby whose eyes seem too knowing. In others, he appears without form at all, felt rather than seen, a heaviness in the chest, a clarity that arrives without explanation, a sense that something unfinished must be finished soon. These experiences are not meant to frighten. They are invitations. Azrael's role, even in these moments, is not to change fate, but to align the soul with it, to loosen attachment, to allow reflection, to grant the rare gift of awareness before finality. Not all souls receive this gift. Some lives end suddenly, without warning, because preparation would not change the outcome. But for others, those capable of reflection, reconciliation, or acceptance, Azrael's nearness is felt in advance, and that nearness changes people. Those who sense it often withdraw from noise. They grow quiet. They begin giving things away, not possessions alone, but words long withheld, apologies long delayed, gratitude long unspoken. They do not always understand why they feel compelled to do this, but the soul does. In Sufi teachings, these moments are described as the soul beginning its departure while the body still lives, a gradual untying, a soft release. Azrael, in this view, does not sever the bond abruptly. He loosens it, thread by thread. Dreams become clearer, memories resurface. Regrets rise not to torment, but to be acknowledged. Forgiveness becomes urgent. Time feels both short and expansive. This is Azrael at work, not as an executioner, not as a shadow, but as a guide, preparing the crossing. There are stories of saints and mystics who spoke openly of meeting Azrael before death. They did not describe fear. They described familiarity, as though greeting someone they had always known but never named. One such story tells of a man who dreamed of a door opening in an empty field. A figure stood beside it, neither inviting nor blocking him. When the man asked what lay beyond the door, the figure answered only, "What you are ready to carry." The man woke changed. Weeks later, he died peacefully. These stories are not meant to be taken as literal maps of the afterlife. They are expressions of an internal truth. When death approaches, the soul begins to orient itself toward what comes next. Azrael facilitates that orientation. But preparation is not always gentle. For some, dreams become unsettling. Nightmares repeat. Images of falling, drowning, or being chased appear again and again. These are not punishments. They are signals of resistance. The soul is clinging to identity, clinging to control, clinging to fear. Azrael does not remove these fears in advance. He allows them to surface, because only what is acknowledged can be released. This is why some people awaken from such dreams, shaken but transformed. They begin to confront truths they have avoided for years. They change behavior. They seek meaning where they once sought distraction. They do not know Azrael's name, but they feel his proximity. And proximity alters priorities. Yet even with preparation, the final moment remains unavoidable. Azrael does not offer escape. He offers readiness. There is a profound difference. Readiness does not mean certainty about what lies beyond. It means acceptance of what lies behind. A willingness to let the life lived be complete, imperfect, unfinished, but whole. This is why Azrael's early appearances are often quiet and ambiguous. Too much clarity would provoke panic. Too much detail would overwhelm the mind. Instead, he allows the soul to arrive at understanding on its own terms. Angels of death who serve under Azrael are sometimes said to deliver these warnings instead of him. They appear in dreams or moments of crisis, acting as messengers of transition rather than finality. But Azrael is always aware, always watching. He does not intervene unnecessarily, because preparation, like life itself, must be chosen. There are also stories of those who ignored the signs. People who felt the nearness of death and turned away from it, burying themselves deeper in distraction, denial, or excess. In these cases, Azrael still came at the appointed time, but the transition was harder. Not because Azrael punished resistance, but because resistance makes separation painful. The soul that refuses to acknowledge the end experiences it as rupture rather than release. This is not judgment. It is consequence. Azrael does not reward awareness or punish ignorance. He simply ensures the transition occurs. How it feels depends on how prepared the soul has become, and this is the quiet power of his warnings. They do not change destiny. They change experience. In many cultures, elders are said to know when they are near death. They speak of it calmly. They settle affairs. They say goodbye. These are not instincts of the body. They are responses of the soul. Azrael's nearness sharpens that awareness. He does not appear to children in this way. He does not burden them with foresight. He does not warn those who would only fear. His approach is precise, tailored to the soul's capacity. Precision defines him. And still, for all this subtlety, Azrael remains feared, because knowing the end is near is a heavy thing. Awareness can feel like weight. Preparation can feel like loss in advance. Many would rather be surprised than consciously let go. Azrael understands this. He does not judge that choice either. Some lives end without warning, some with long preparation. Both are valid. Both are necessary. Both are part of the balance. This is why Azrael cannot be reduced to a symbol of fear alone. He is also a symbol of transition, of the soul's ability to recognize itself beyond the body. Dreams, visions, and warnings are not signs of doom. They are signs of nearness. And nearness, when met honestly, can be one of the most profound experiences of existence. Every role in creation carries weight. Some carry the weight of guidance. Some carry the weight of protection. Some carry the weight of obedience in motion, messages delivered, battles fought, commands fulfilled. But Azrael carried a different kind of weight. He carried accumulation. Every ending added to him, not as memory, not as emotion, but as responsibility. The universe did not lighten his task over time. It deepened it. With every life that ended, the reality of his role became heavier, not because it grew more difficult, but because it grew more complete. Other angels acted in moments. Azrael acted across all moments. This distinction is crucial to understanding why his burden was singular. A warrior angel could rest between battles. A messenger could return to stillness after delivering a word. Even the angel who would one day end time itself waited in readiness, not action. Azrael never waited. There was always another ending. This constancy reshaped him. Not outwardly, his nature did not change, but inwardly. in the way he existed within creation. He did not experience anticipation or relief. There was no climax to his work, no resolution until the very end of all things. His role had no pause, and yet he did not falter. This endurance is what made Azrael irreplaceable. Angels are beings of immense capacity, but capacity is not the same as sustainability. Many could take a soul. Many could carry out death once, or 100 times, or even thousands. But to do so endlessly, without bias, without fatigue, without emotional distortion, that required something rare. It required surrender of self. Azrael did not cling to identity. He did not define himself by rank or recognition. He did not seek understanding from angels or forgiveness from humans. His sense of self was entirely bound to function. He was not performing death. He was holding it. This is why no other angel could share his role fully. To do so would be to absorb the cumulative gravity of every ending ever experienced. It would fracture even the strongest being. Azrael did not fracture because he did not resist the burden. Resistance multiplies weight. Acceptance distributes it. Azrael accepted. This acceptance did not come from passivity. It came from clarity. He understood the necessity of his role in a way that left no room for resentment. Death was not an error in creation. It was its boundary. And boundaries, once established, must be maintained. He maintained it perfectly. Still, the burden was not invisible. There are traditions that suggest Azrael's immense form, the countless wings, the innumerable eyes, the vast reach, was not merely a sign of power, but of load. Each attribute represented not dominance, but distribution, a way to carry what could not be carried otherwise. One being, infinite endings. To hold that, Azrael had to become something more than an individual. He became a system. This is why he commanded other angels of death, not as subordinates in hierarchy, but as extensions of his function. They acted where scale demanded multiplication, but responsibility always returned to him. Every soul passed through his awareness. Every ending resolved within his charge. This made him central to the balance of creation. Remove him, and death would become chaos. Delay him, and life would lose urgency. Alter him, and justice would fracture. Azrael was not merely trusted, he was necessary. Yet, necessity breeds misunderstanding. Humans, confronted with the pain of loss, needed someone to blame. Death without agency felt unbearable. So, Azrael became the face of grief, the figure assigned to sorrow, the name whispered when life ended too soon or too painfully. Azrael did not protest this association. Grief needed somewhere to land, but grief misunderstood him. He did not cause loss. He did not choose timing. He did not design suffering. He carried out what had already been written. This is a subtle truth, and subtle truths rarely survive fear intact. Even angels felt the weight of this misunderstanding. Some avoided Azrael not out of fear, but out of discomfort. To stand near him was to be reminded that all service concludes, that even devotion has an end point. Azrael did not correct them either. Correction would require explanation. Explanation would invite debate. Debate would imply flexibility. There was none. His role did not allow negotiation, and so he remained alone, not isolated, but singular. This singularity did not mean emptiness. It meant focus. Azrael was not distracted by praise or condemned by fear. He did not look backward at endings already completed, nor forward with anticipation of those yet to come. He existed at the boundary. This allowed him to remain impartial in a way no other being could. Impartiality is often mistaken for coldness, but it is actually discipline. To treat every soul equally requires distance, not from compassion, but from preference. Azrael had no preferences. He did not favor the powerful. He did not linger over the beloved. He did not rush through the forgotten. every soul was met with the same certainty. And certainty, when applied without exception, becomes fairness. This fairness is why, even in traditions that fear Azrael, there is also reverence. Deep down, humanity recognizes the necessity of someone who cannot be bribed, delayed, or persuaded. A universe governed by emotion alone would collapse under inconsistency. Azrael prevented that collapse. Still, the burden remained, to stand at every bedside, to move through every battlefield, to pass unseen through every disaster, every quiet room, every sudden accident, to witness humanity at its most honest moment when pretenses fall away, when truth rises unfiltered. Azrael witnessed that endlessly, and he carried it without commentary. This is why his silence mattered so deeply. Speech releases pressure. Silence contains it. Azrael contained more than any being ever created. And yet, there was an end to even his burden. Not yet, but promised. From the beginning, Azrael's role had a boundary too. It would last only as long as death existed. And death itself was not eternal. This knowledge did not ease his task, but it gave it shape. He was not an endless tormentor. He was a finite steward. One day, there would be no more endings to manage, no more transitions to oversee, no more souls to guide from breath to beyond. Until that day, Azrael carried what no one else could, and he carried it perfectly. For most of existence, death feels permanent. It defines life so completely that imagining a world without it feels impossible. Every choice, every fear, every hope is shaped by the knowledge that time will eventually run out. Death is the horizon no one crosses twice, the certainty that gives weight to every moment. But in the deepest layers of sacred tradition, there is a truth that unsettles even this certainty. Death itself is not eternal, and neither is Azrael's role. From the beginning, death was introduced as a boundary, not a destination. It was a condition of a particular phase of creation, not its final state. As long as the world unfolded in time, death was necessary, but time itself was never meant to last forever. Azrael knew this. His task, vast as it was, had an ending written into it from the start. This knowledge did not make his burden lighter, but it made it meaningful. He was not an endless collector of souls trapped in repetition. He was a steward moving creation toward completion. Every soul he guided was one step closer to a moment when guidance would no longer be needed. In Islamic tradition, this moment is tied to the end of time itself, the Day of Judgment, a day when the structures that govern existence collapse and are remade. Mountains will crumble, seas will boil away, the sky will tear open. Time, as it has always been known, will stop advancing. On that day, every soul that ever lived will be gathered, and death, which once ruled every moment, will be brought forth as a created thing, not as an idea, not as an event, but as a being. According to ancient narrations, death will be shaped into the form of a ram, solid, unmistakable, undeniable. It will be placed between paradise and hell, visible to all creation. Every soul will recognize it instantly. This is what governed your lives. This is what ended your stories. This is what you feared. And then, before all of creation, death itself will be destroyed, slain, ended. In that moment, something unimaginable will occur. There will be no more dying. Not in paradise, not in punishment, not anywhere. Endings will cease to exist. And with the destruction of death, Azrael's role will finally conclude. This is the only moment when Azrael does not stand at the boundary, because the boundary will be gone. For the first time since the fall of humanity, there will be no separation between moments, no ticking forward, no approaching final breath. Eternity will no longer be a promise or a threat. It will be reality. What happens to Azrael then? Traditions are careful here. They do not describe his fate in detail, not because it is insignificant, but because human language struggles to describe a being whose function has been fulfilled completely. Azrael is not destroyed. He is not punished. He is not erased. He is released. Release, for Azrael, is not rest in the way humans understand rest. It is completion, a return to stillness without responsibility, a silence without accumulation. The burden he carried, the endless procession of endings, will no longer exist. For the first time, Azrael will not be needed. This idea reframes everything about him. He was never meant to be feared as a monster. He was never meant to be worshipped as a force. He was meant to be temporary. Powerful, yes. Essential, yes, but temporary. This is one of the most profound aspects of Azrael's story. The angel most associated with finality is himself defined by a final ending. His existence is bound to a phase of creation that will pass away. Death is not the ultimate truth. Transformation is. Azrael served transformation by ensuring transition. He did not oppose eternity. He protected the path toward it. This understanding shifts how his past actions are viewed. Every soul he guided was not being pushed into nothingness. They were being moved forward toward a state where death would eventually lose all meaning. Even suffering, when seen through this lens, becomes part of a process rather than a permanent condition. This does not erase pain. It does not justify cruelty, but it places them within a finite chapter of existence. And Azrael presided over that chapter from beginning to end. There is a quiet symmetry here. Azrael was chosen because he could accept unbearable responsibility without hesitation. He carried out the first act that made human life possible, the gathering of dust. He oversaw every ending that followed, and when endings themselves ended, his task concluded. Beginning, middle, end, Azrael stood at all three. This is why some mystics describe him not as the angel of death, but as the angel of transition. Death was only one phase of what he managed. His true role was movement, guiding creation through necessary thresholds until it reached a state where thresholds were no longer needed. In this view, Azrael is not opposed to life. He serves it. Life that never changes stagnates. Life that never ends loses urgency. Life that never transforms becomes meaningless. Azrael ensured that life moved forward, even when forward meant letting go. When death is finally destroyed, something extraordinary will happen to the souls of the righteous and the condemned alike. Fear will vanish, not because danger is gone, but because time is gone. Hope will no longer lean toward a future. Regret will no longer echo backward. Everything will exist fully in the present, without erosion. This is the state death prevented, and it is the state death made possible. Without death, there would have been no journey toward eternity. Without Azrael, death would have been chaos instead of order. This is the paradox at the heart of his story. The angel associated with endings was essential to the arrival of forever. Azrael's silence, his discipline, his impartiality, all of it served a purpose larger than any single life or culture. He was shaping a path, not closing a door, and when the door is no longer needed, it will disappear. This does not mean Azrael becomes irrelevant. Completion is not irrelevance. Completion is fulfillment. Every role in creation is defined not only by what it does, but by when it stops doing it. A role without an ending becomes a prison. Azrael's role had an ending written into its foundation. This is mercy, even for the angel of death. Long after Azrael's role was defined in the heavens, humanity began to redefine him on earth. This was inevitable. Humans do not encounter death as angels do. Angels see function. Humans feel loss. And wherever loss exists, the mind searches for shape, for face, for symbol, something it can name and fear, something it can blame. And so, Azrael began to change, not in truth, but in story. As civilizations formed, people tried to understand death by turning it into an image. They carved it into stone, painted it on walls, whispered it into myths. They wrapped it in cloaks, gave it weapons, hollowed out its eyes, and made it stalk the living. Death became a figure, and Azrael, slowly, became its shadow. This transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded across centuries, shaped by grief, war, plague, and the helplessness of watching loved ones disappear. When death came too early, too violently, or without reason, people needed a villain. Azrael became that villain, not because he was cruel, but because he was present. Humans rarely curse what they never see. They curse what arrives at the worst moment. They curse what cannot be resisted. They curse what does not explain itself. Azrael explained nothing, so fear filled the silence. In some cultures, his name was avoided entirely, spoken only in whispers or replaced with euphemisms. In others, his name was invoked to frighten children into obedience, as though fear of death could enforce morality. Stories grew darker. Azrael became skeletal. He carried blades. He hunted souls. None of this was true, but all of it revealed something about humanity. People were not afraid of Azrael. They were afraid of losing control. Death strips away every illusion. Humans cling to power, status, certainty, permanence. No matter how advanced a civilization becomes, death remains undefeated. And what cannot be defeated is often demonized. Azrael bore that demonization quietly. He did not intervene in myth-making. He did not correct imagery. He did not reclaim his narrative, because his role did not depend on human understanding. Still, fragments of truth survived. Even in the darkest depictions, Azrael was rarely shown as chaotic. He was methodical, precise, calm. He did not rage. He did not panic. He simply arrived. This consistency mattered. It hinted at something deeper, an intuition buried beneath fear. Humans sensed that death was not random, even when it felt unfair. They sensed order, even when they could not see it. Azrael represented that order. Over time, cultures outside the original religious traditions encountered his name. Poets, philosophers, and artists borrowed it, not always knowing its origins, but feeling its weight. Azrael appeared in poetry as a gentle collector of souls, moving through fields and battlefields alike. In some works, he was mournful, burdened by his task. In others, he was serene, offering release rather than destruction. These interpretations softened the image. They acknowledged what fear had hidden, that death is not always violent, that sometimes it is mercy, that sometimes it ends suffering that life refuses to release. Yet even these gentler portrayals misunderstood Azrael in one crucial way. They gave him emotion. They imagined him grieving. They imagined him struggling. They imagined him conflicted. Azrael was none of these. Emotion belonged to souls still bound to time. Azrael existed at the boundary, not within the current. His steadiness was not apathy, it was necessity. To feel fully would be to collapse. Still, humanity needed stories that felt human. And so Azrael became increasingly symbolic. He stopped being an angel and became an idea, the embodiment of death itself. In Western imagination, this eventually crystallized into the Grim Reaper, hooded, faceless, armed, stalking the living with inevitability. This figure was not Azrael. It was humanity's fear wearing a costume. The Grim Reaper was cold. Azrael was precise. The Grim Reaper threatened. Azrael concluded. The Grim Reaper chose. Azrael obeyed. But symbolism does not care for accuracy. It cares for resonance. And the resonance of death, for most people, is terror. Even so, Azrael's name carried something the Grim Reaper never could. History, sacred weight. The sense that death was not a rogue force, but a servant of something higher. This is why Azrael appears again and again in literature and popular culture, not just as a villain, but as a figure of fascination. Writers returned to him when they wanted to explore questions of fate, morality, and the meaning of endings. Why must things end? What happens when they do? Who stands at the threshold? Azrael stood there. Even in light-hearted settings, his name carried gravity. A cat named Azrael, a whispered reference in a poem, a shadowy figure in a story. These were not accidents. They were echoes of something ancient, something unresolved in the human psyche. Death, no matter how familiar, is never fully understood, and Azrael remained its most enduring symbol. But here is the truth humanity often missed. Azrael did not take joy in endings, nor sorrow. He did not celebrate fear, nor condemn hope. He was not shaped by the stories told about him. He did not become darker because humans imagined him so. He remained unchanged. This unchanging nature is what made the myths possible in the first place. Because when a being does not respond, does not defend, does not adapt to perception, others fill in the silence. Humans filled it with shadows. Yet across all cultures and interpretations, one idea persisted. When Azrael appears, the story is over, not paused, not redirected, ended. That idea endured because it was true. And in that truth, humanity found both terror and strange comfort. Terror, because endings are final. Comfort, because finality brings certainty. Uncertainty is far more frightening than inevitability. Azrael gave inevitability a form. Even those who feared him relied on him. Without Azrael, death would be meaningless chaos. With him, it was structured, contained, governed. This is why, beneath every dark depiction, there remained a quiet respect, an unspoken understanding that someone had to carry this burden, and that Azrael did. Every story eventually reaches a point where nothing more can be added. Not because the story failed, but because it is complete. This is the truth Azrael has always embodied, not as an idea, not as a symbol, but as a living boundary between what continues and what must end. And now, at the close of this journey, his story turns inward, toward the question that has followed him since the beginning. What does it mean to exist at the edge of everything? Azrael was never meant to be understood the way other beings are understood. He does not fit neatly into moral categories. He is neither hero nor villain. He does not reward or punish. He does not explain himself. He completes. And yet, through humanity's fear, reverence, myths, and misunderstandings, one truth emerges with absolute clarity. Azrael's presence gives meaning to life precisely because it defines its limit. Without an ending, stories dissolve. Without an ending, choices lose urgency. Without an ending, love becomes casual, sacrifice becomes optional, and courage becomes unnecessary. Azrael made life matter, not by threatening it, but by ensuring it would not last forever. This is why death, though feared, has always been woven into humanity's deepest philosophies. Mortality forces awareness. It sharpens attention. It strips away illusions. And standing quietly behind that realization is Azrael, not pushing, not pulling, simply waiting. Humanity has spent ages trying to escape this truth, through monuments, through legacy, through wealth, power, memory, and name. But none of these stop Azrael. They only delay understanding. In the final moments of life, none of the constructed identities remain. Titles fall away. Possessions lose meaning. The future dissolves. What remains is the soul, unfiltered, unshielded, honest. And Azrael meets it there, not with accusation, not with comfort, but with certainty. This is your crossing. What happens next does not belong to him. He does not decide reward or punishment. He does not weigh worth. His task ends at the threshold. Beyond it lies judgment, mercy, consequence, or peace realities governed by something higher than him. This distinction is vital. Azrael is not the end of existence. He is the end of this phase of existence. And that difference changes everything. When humanity imagines death as annihilation, fear multiplies. But when death is understood as transition, fear transforms into gravity, seriousness, rather than panic. Life becomes something to be lived deliberately, not hoarded desperately. Azrael's silence invites that deliberation. He does not tell humanity how to live. He does not enforce morality. He simply ensures that one day, living stops. And in knowing that, humanity is free to choose what to do with the time given. This is why Azrael's role has endured across cultures and centuries. Not because people agree on who he is, but because everyone feels what he represents. The quiet pressure of an ending approaching. Even when it feels distant, the knowledge that every someday eventually becomes too late. Azrael does not rush that moment, but he does not prevent it either. And that balance between patience and inevitability is what makes him unlike any other being in creation. He does not chase souls. He does not stalk the living. He waits. Waiting is not passive. Waiting, when paired with certainty, is absolute control. Azrael's patience is not mercy, nor is it cruelty. It is alignment. He moves only when the moment is complete, when nothing more can be added to the story without breaking its meaning. This is why his arrival feels sudden, even when death has been approaching for years. The moment itself is precise. It cannot be anticipated fully. It cannot be rehearsed. It can only be met. And when it is met, Azrael ensures that the crossing is final. No returning, no rewriting, no extensions. This finality is not meant to terrify. It is meant to clarify, because when life is infinite, meaning becomes diluted. But when life is finite, meaning condenses. Every act matters more. Every word carries weight. Every choice echoes. Azrael stands as the guardian of that condensation. He ensures that life does not sprawl endlessly into insignificance. And yet, even as his role looms over every life, Azrael is not the focus of existence. Life is. He does not demand attention. He does not seek remembrance. He does not want worship or fear. His presence is most powerful when it is ignored until it cannot be. This is why, at the very end of time, his role concludes quietly. No celebration, no condemnation, no spectacle. Death ends. Azrael ends. Not because he failed, but because he succeeded completely. And in that final silence, eternity begins not as endless time, but as timelessness. No more waiting, no more endings, no more thresholds to cross. The angel of death will have nothing left to do. This is perhaps the most humanizing truth about Azrael. His purpose was never to rule forever. His existence was defined by a task that would one day no longer be necessary. Completion is not tragedy. Completion is fulfillment. So how should Azrael be remembered? Not as a monster, not as a reaper, not as a shadow lurking behind every joy, but as the being who made joy meaningful, as the presence that ensured stories mattered because they ended, as the silent guardian who stood faithfully at the boundary so that life, on one side of it, could be lived fully. Azrael does not ask to be feared. He does not ask to be loved. He does not ask to be understood. He asks nothing at all. He simply waits. And one day, when the last breath is taken, when the last soul crosses, when death itself is no more, he will wait no longer. Until then, his story remains intertwined with every human story ever told, not as the villain of the tale, but as the reason the tale has meaning in the first place. This is not the end of Azrael's story. It is the understanding of it. And understanding, like life itself, arrives only when we are willing to face the truth without turning away. Because in the end, Azrael is not the one who takes life. Time does. He simply knows when time is done.